right, let's dive into this. Mark Zuckerberg. Seems like we've got a mountain of articles, research, even some of your own notes here. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, he's a tough one to ignore, isn't he?
Mm,
Love him or hate him, Zuckerberg's really shaped how we connect online. And not just that, how we communicate, consume information, the whole digital age, basically.
absolutely. Okay, so the listeners sent us a lot on Zuckerberg. I guess our mission here is to try to distill it, find those key insights, the really interesting stuff that maybe they wouldn't catch just browsing headlines.
Right, like a cheat sheet almost to understanding his impact. And it's not just tech, it's way beyond that.
For sure. Okay, so one thing that really jumps out from the start, the research you sent over, Zuckerberg started coding really young, like middle school young.
Oh yeah, and not just dabbling either. His dad actually got him a programming tutor. That's some serious commitment.
Yeah,
Clearly the guy had talent, even way back then.
definitely. It's almost like predestined, like it was always going to be computers for him.
And not just the talent, right? Like the environment to support that talent. I mean, remember Zucknet, the messaging thing he made for his dad's dental practice?
Oh, yeah, like a proto-Facebook, but for teeth.
Exactly. And it's not just some kid messing around. He's actually solving a problem, streamlining communication in the office. Even at that age, the entrepreneurial spirit's there.
So fast forward a bit, Zuckerberg's at Harvard now, and this is where things get, well, interesting. The infamous face smash incident.
Oh yeah, face mash. Can't talk about Zuckerberg without mentioning that one.
So for anyone who somehow missed it, he basically built this website where Harvard students could rate each other's attractiveness.
And he used photos. He basically scraped them without permission.
Not exactly ethical, to say the least, but the thing went viral, obviously.
Total controversy. Harvard's not happy. You know the story.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. It showed something crucial about Zuckerberg. This knack for creating things that people want. Like he tapped into something, even if it was a bit, well, morally questionable.
Right, like that whole move fast and break things ethos, but cranked up to 11.
Exactly. And it kind of foreshadows, the issues Facebook would have later on. This tension between pushing boundaries and, well, dealing with the fallout.
Okay, so 2004, big year. He launches the Facebook, just for Harvard students at first. But then, boom, it just explodes.
Goes way beyond those Ivy walls, that's for sure. I mean, what do you think? Besides obviously good timing, what made it take off like that?
I think simplicity was key. It was easy to use, intuitive, and it tapped into this fundamental human need. We want to connect with other people.
And then you get the network effect, right?
Yeah.
The more people join, the more valuable the platform becomes.
Yeah.
It's like this snowball effect.
Totally. From dorm room to global phenomenon pretty much overnight. And the way Facebook evolved after that, from this simple network to this data-driven giant, it's kind of mind-blowing. 2007, they opened it up to developers. Third-party apps start popping up everywhere. Farmville, anyone.
Oh, yeah. Farmville, that was a whole thing. Talk about a cultural moment. People were glued to their screens tending their virtual crops.
Right, and it showed how Facebook was becoming more than just a way to connect. It was like a platform for, well, everything. But then the real game changer, the advertising model.
Oh, absolutely. This is where it gets really interesting, from a business perspective at least. They figured out how to use all that user data to create these hyper-targeted ads. It was like printing money, basically.
It was brilliant, but also kind of the beginning of the ethical dilemmas that would dog them later on, this whole idea of data privacy, commodification of information.
You're spot on. They could target ads so precisely, incredibly effective for advertisers. But it raised questions about what they were doing with our data. Were they manipulating us? Questions that still haven't really gone away, even today.
Then you have the acquisitions, right? These strategic moves that really cemented their dominance. 2012, Instagram, for $1 billion. Seemed steep at the time, but
Almost like a bargain now, doesn't it?
then 2014, what's up? 19 billion with a B.
And don't forget Oculus. Same year, $2 billion. Virtual reality was still pretty niche back then.
Right, but Zuckerberg saw the potential. And it was the foundation for, well, everything he's doing with the metaverse now.
He was playing 3D chess while everyone else was in checkers. So by his late 20s, Zuckerberg's built this empire, he's ridiculously wealthy, and he seems unstoppable. But then, things start to get a little less rosy, right?
Yeah, our sources really get into the underbelly of all this success. And the Cambridge Analytica scandal in 2018, that's like the ground zero for a lot of it. Millions of users' data, harvested without their knowledge, used for political campaigns. It was a huge blow to their reputation.
Huge. And I think it really exposed the vulnerabilities of this data-driven model they'd built. Zuckerberg's hauled in front of Congress. He becomes the face of big tech's ethical failings. It was a watershed moment.
And it wasn't just Cambridge Analytica. You've got the spread of misinformation, the role of Facebook in political polarization, the 2016 U.S. elections, COVID conspiracies, the list goes on. It was like they were losing control of the beast they had created.
Right? Like they built this incredibly powerful machine, but weren't quite sure how to steer it anymore. And they did try to address it. Fact-checking programs, AI moderation, even created that oversight board to get some outside input.
Yeah, but it always felt a bit like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound.
Exactly. They were constantly reacting to crises, never quite getting ahead of the curve. I mean, the sheer volume of content flowing through Facebook every second, it's almost impossible to manage effectively, like trying to bail out a sinking ship with a teacup. But then right in the middle of all this chaos, Zuckerberg makes this huge move. 2021, Facebook becomes Meta.
Yeah, the metaverse, it's been, well, everyone's talking about it, but honestly, I'm still not sure I get it. It's more than just virtual reality headsets, right?
Way more. Think of it like, okay, imagine a whole universe, but digital. It's always there, always connected. And it's not just separate from the real world. The idea is it blends with it.
Okay, so less like putting on a headset and disappearing into a game and more like,
More like the digital and physical are intertwined. You could be at a concert, but your friends from across the world are there virtually. You could work in an office, but it's a virtual one that feels totally real. Explore historical places, all without leaving your house.
okay, I'm starting to see the appeal, but how does that even work? Is this all happening through those VR headsets or is it something else?
VR is definitely a big part of it, especially right now.
Mm-hmm.
Meta's Oculus headsets, those are letting people experience these virtual worlds, interact with others, basically get a taste of what's possible.
Right, so it's kind of the first step.
Exactly. But the long-term vision, it's way bigger.
Yeah.
Zuckerberg's talking about a future where we move between physical and digital seamlessly. VR, augmented reality, and probably tech that hasn't even been invented yet.
So it's like the internet, but instead of just looking at it, we're inside of it.
You got it. And AI, artificial intelligence, that's the key to making all this work. Meta's using it to create realistic avatars, populate these virtual worlds with characters that can actually respond to you, and giving people the tools to build and interact with these spaces. They're pouring billions into it.
Makes sense. You'd need some serious tech to pull that off. But okay, so what are people actually doing in this metaverse? What's the content?
That's the big question, right? It's still early days. We're seeing glimpses of it with platforms like Horizon Worlds, people creating their own spaces, hanging out with friends, playing games. They even have events in there.
So it's kind of like a blank canvas right now.
Yeah, and as the tech gets better, who knows what's possible? Virtual museums, educational stuff, entertainment that we can't even imagine. Maybe even new ways of working.
It's mind-blowing, but let's be real. Most people aren't walking around with VR headsets glued to their faces. Has it actually caught on?
Not really. Not in the mainstream way. The tech is still pricey, a little trunky, and the content isn't quite there yet. That must have got to be in their feeling. Horizon Worlds, specifically, it's gotten some flack. Buggy, not enough to do, kind of feels empty sometimes.
So Zuckerberg just, I don't know, way ahead of the curve? Or is this metaverse thing really going to be the next big thing?
Hard to say. There are a lot of doubters, even in the tech world. Some people think it's a distraction, from all the issues Meta's already dealing with, data privacy, all that. And then there's the worry that it could make some things worse. Harassment online, misinformation, loss of privacy, all that could be magnified in the metaverse.
Yeah, that's a scary thought. It seems like every time tech takes a step forward, there's a whole new set of problems that come with it.
It's true. And that's why we need to talk about this stuff now while it's still early. What are the risks? How can we make sure the metaverse is built in a way that benefits people, not just corporations? Those are important questions.
Okay, so the metaverse, it's a long game. Maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't. But what about right now? What's Zuckerberg focused on today?
Well, one thing's for sure, artificial intelligence. He thinks it's the key to unlocking a lot of what Meta is trying to do on the existing platforms and in the metaverse.
I can see how it fits into all of it. Content recommendations, realistic virtual stuff. But can you give me some real-world examples of AI working on Facebook, Instagram, all that?
Oh, for sure. Content moderation's a big one. They're using AI algorithms to try and weed out the bad stuff.
Yeah.
Hate speech, violence, misinformation, all that. Not perfect, but it plays a big role in keeping the platforms safe.
Makes sense. But it also brings up those questions about censorship, algorithmic bias. How do we know these AI systems are fair?
That's a tough one. It's a constant balancing act. Protect people, but also protect free speech.
Yeah.
Meta's gotten it from both sides. People saying they censor too much and people saying they don't do enough. It's a constant struggle, that's for sure.
Billions of users, all creating content. Sounds like an impossible job. But beyond content moderation, where else is AI shaping things for users?
Think about your newsfeed. The order you see posts in, that's all controlled by an algorithm. It looks at what you've done before, your interests, who you interact with. The goal is to show you stuff you actually care about.
So like a personalized content DJ.
Yeah, basically. And it's the same with ads. They use your demographics, your interests, even your browsing history to tailor the ads you see. The idea is to make them less annoying, more relevant.
But again, that data privacy question pops up. Are we being manipulated?
Yeah, that's the thing about AI. Incredible potential, but also potential for misuse. It's a powerful tool.
Powerful and kind of scary all at once. Okay, so AI is huge for Zuckerberg. Anything else on his radar? Any big initiatives?
They're making a big push into hardware. They want to be more than a software company. Control the whole ecosystem, the devices we use to access the metaverse, everything.
So beyond the VR headsets.
Oh yeah, they've been hinting at AR glasses. Augmented reality. Blend the digital and real world. Walking down the street, you see virtual directions, have a video call, but your friend looks like a hologram right there with you.
Sounds like sci-fi.
Right. But it could be reality soon. They're also into wearables, smartwatches, fitness trackers, stuff that can collect all sorts of data about us.
So blurring the lines between physical and digital even further. But all this has got to be attracting attention, right? Governments, regulators, all that.
Big time. Antitrust lawsuits, data privacy investigations, all that's happening. Governments are getting worried about how much power these tech companies have.
Zuckerberg's walking a tightrope, all this ambition, but now he's got governments breathing down his neck. That can't be easy.
Definitely not. Competition, skepticism about the metaverse, regulation. He's got a lot on his plate, but he's also shown he can adapt. He's a survivor, that's for sure.
Okay, so beyond all the tech stuff, business deals, I'm curious about Zuckerberg, the person.
Yeah.
Your research had some interesting tidbits about his personal life. What makes him tick?
One thing that jumped out was his fascination with ancient Rome. He studied Latin, even honeymooned in Rome.
Really? So is he like secretly plotting to be a modern-day Caesar, ruling over his digital empire?
Maybe not quite that dramatic, but one article, it said he sees parallels between Rome's rise and fall and what's happening with tech companies today. He knows the dangers of getting too big, too arrogant. Seems like he wants to avoid those mistakes.
That's actually a pretty interesting comparison. So is he building a virtual Colosseum? Metaverse gladiator battles?
Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
But the article talked about how he's focused on building a strong culture at Meta. Innovation, resilience, thinking long term. He wants to build a company that lasts, that can weather the storms.
Kind of ironic, isn't it? Meta, they're often criticized for being secretive, controlling, and here he is drawing inspiration from, well, Rome, which at least in theory was about public service, civic duty.
Yeah, it's definitely a contradiction. And the article acknowledged that. Zuckerberg's vision, it doesn't always match up with how a giant corporation actually operates. That's something he'll have to figure out.
Okay, but let's not forget, Zuckerberg's not just a CEO, he's a husband, a father. Did your research get into how he balances all that with running, well, one of the biggest companies in the world?
Not a ton of detail, but we get glimpses. Him and his wife, Priscilla Chan, they try to keep things low-key, especially for their kids. They're big into philanthropy, too. Education, healthcare, all that, through their foundation.
Easy to forget there's a human being under all that. It makes you wonder, what really drives him? Innovation, leaving a legacy, something else entirely.
One article quoted him saying his goal is to connect the world, bring people closer. Sounds idealistic, maybe even naive, but it seems like he really believes it.
But connecting the world, it's not always a good thing. Facebook's been used to spread lies, incite violence, even influence elections. How does he square all that with this idea of bringing people together?
That's the big question, right? He thinks connection is good, but he's seeing the downsides. The research suggests he's changing, becoming more aware of the ethical stuff.
So is he changing Meta, too? Are they actually becoming a more responsible company?
Too early to tell. They've made some changes, new policies, more content moderation, but some people say it's not enough. The whole business model, the way they make money, it's still based on things that are causing problems.
It feels like we're at a crossroads, not just with Meta, but with all these tech companies. Uncontrolled growth, unchecked power, that era is ending. Governments are stepping in, users are more skeptical, the ethical questions are finally getting attention.
And Zuckerberg's right in the middle of it. He embodies both the good and the bad of the digital age. The choices he makes now, They're going to have a huge impact on all of us.
A lot of pressure for one guy. I'm curious, what do you think his biggest regret is? Anything he wishes he could undo?
One source I read, they thought maybe he regrets not taking data privacy more seriously early on. Facebook's approach to data is pretty loose, and it bit them later with Cambridge Analytica and other scandal.
Hindsight, right. But it's a good lesson for everyone building tech. You can't just ignore the ethical side of things.
Absolutely. We need to think about the consequences from day one. It's not just about cool tech. It's about how it affects people, communities, society.
And that brings us back to the metaverse. This giant digital world he's betting everything on. Is it the future or just a fancy video game?
Jury's still out. The tech's still being developed. We don't know all the ways it could be used. But the potential is there. Working with people across the world. But it feels like you're actually in the same room. Concerts, sporting events, all that. But you experience it from your living room.
It's amazing, but is it too much? Are we already spending enough time in front of screens?
That's a valid point. And it's something Zuckerberg needs to address. The metaverse shouldn't replace the real world. It should enhance it. Create new ways to connect, to experience things that aren't possible physically.
But what about the bad stuff? Harassment, bullying, even crime. It all happens online already. How do we make the metaverse safe for everyone?
That's critical. Meta and all the companies involved, they need to make safety a priority. Rules, moderation, educate users. It's got to be built right from the start.
It's uncharted territory. The metaverse, it could be amazing, connect people in ways we can't even imagine. But it could also make our problems worse. It all depends on the choices we make.
Exactly. Zuckerberg, other leaders, policymakers, and us, the users. We all have a part in shaping this.
So it's not just up to Zuckerberg, it's on all of us.
We're all in this together. And that's why it's important to talk about it, understand the issues, and demand better from the people in charge.
So we started with Face Mesh, ended up in the metaverse, dorm room coder to, well, congressional testimony. What a story. Looking back at all this stuff, what's the main takeaway for you? What thread runs through all of it?
Tough to pick just one, but I keep coming back to ambition. Zuckerberg's got it in spades. This drive to push limits, to create things no one's ever seen before. And that's led to some incredible stuff, Billions of people connected in ways we couldn't have imagined not long ago. But it hasn't come without a price.
You're talking about the data privacy stuff, misinformation, elections, all that.
Exactly. His ambition, it's often run ahead of, well, thinking about the consequences. And now he's got to deal with the fallout. Governments, users, even people inside Meta, they're all demanding he takes responsibility.
It's like he's always playing catch-up, fixing the problems he created in the first place. Think he's learning from it all, or just going to keep making the same mistakes?
That's the big question. There are signs he's changing,
Yeah.
Getting more aware of the ethical side of things. But you still get that sense that he thinks he knows best, that his vision for the future is the right one, even if the rest of us aren't quite there yet.
It makes you wonder, what's the end goal? Does he really just want to connect everyone, make the world better, or is it something else? Ego, maybe?
I think it's a bit of both. He believes in connection. I think that's genuine. But he also wants to leave his mark, be remembered as one of the greats. And that kind of ambition, it can be a powerful force, good and bad.
Okay, so as we wrap up our deep dive here, what are the big takeaways for the listener? What should they be thinking about as they go back to their own work, their own relationship with tech, all that?
I think the big one is technology. It's not neutral. It reflects the people who build it, their values, their choices. We have to be aware of that, ask questions, demand better. We have to use these tools for good.
So it's not just about sitting back and consuming. We have a responsibility, too.
Absolutely. Every share, every app you download, it shapes the digital world. Be mindful of that. Think about the impact yours and everyone else's.
We're not just passengers. We're part of the crew. We're shaping things, whether we realize it or not.
Exactly. And that's why these conversations matter. We got to engage, understand the issues, and hold the people in charge accountable.
Well said. Okay, that's about it for our deep dive into the world of Mark Zuckerberg. Quite a journey.
It really was. And something tells me it's not over yet.
I think you're right. All right, one last question for you, then we'll let the listener ponder all this. Force for good or force for bad? How will history judge Mark Zuckerberg?
Oh, that's a tough one. Too soon to tell, I think. His story's still being written. But it's a question we should all be asking, not just about him, but about the tech we create and what kind of world we're building.
Good point. On that note, we'll wrap things up. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating and complex legacy of Mark Zuckerberg. Until next time.